Okay, so my name is Jason Roberts. I'm the Director of Editorial. I'm having to look, actually. This is my new job. I'm Director of Editorial at KnowledgeWorks Global. I was formerly the co-owner of Origin Editorial. And I'm going to have my colleagues up here introduce themselves, mainly because I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce Paula's journal. And I say that as a Welshman, and we have the world's longest place name. So we're used to long words, but anyway. Dan, do you want to go first? Because you're right next to the thing.
Hiya, everyone. It's nice to be here. And I'm absolutely blown away by the quality of the talks throughout the day. They're amazing. My name's Dan Stuckey. I'm a senior publishing ethics expert at Elsevier, within Elsevier's Research Integrity and Publishing Ethics Center of Expertise. I lead an investigative team where we investigate mainly post-publication ethics issues.
Let's see. Somebody online says he is kind of quiet. That's not the Dan I know. He's
I can speak up.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Who said that?
Yeah. Okay, Ines, you want to go next?
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Ines Steffens. I'm the editor-in-chief of US Surveillance, and I just looked it up. I was at the first EASE conference in 2009. And of course, I joined EASE after that. I had a role in council since 2015. Then I stopped being member of council and being a vice president for some time to CHEM and also to PIPA. And I'm the co-chair with Aura of the EASE Nordic chapter. So that's my affiliation with EASE. Otherwise, I'm working as an editor, full-time editor of the journal that I mentioned.
Okay, and my name is Paula Säikkönen. I'm working as a research manager at the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare. So I have a quite strong identity as a researcher. However, today I'm standing here as the editor-in-chief of Yhteiskuntapolitiikka journal. And you already heard that these Finnish journals are quite small, so it's only a kind of part-time job for me.
Control of the slides here. Oh, there it is. There we go. All right. Okay, so just briefly, I'm just going to introduce what we're going to talk about today. And then I'm going to ask a bunch of questions to the panel here. So we are facing a challenging environment. All of us are in this boat right now. And every one of us is having to react to things like the oncoming onslaught of AI, both as a positive and a negative way that we can use this. And the industry is struggling to respond. It's also thinking really creatively. So there's pluses and minuses here. And the problems that we face is how do we actually translate that into our practice at the journals that we run? So that's something or other that nobody's got the answer, and you're not going to get the answer at this session either, but we're at least going to talk about the things that we worry about, and I'm sure you'll find them eminently relatable. There are new integrity tools that are appearing. We heard about that this morning. That was a great session. But they have challenges such as can we validate them? And also, more importantly, for your daily practice, what are we supposed to do when we get the information that these tools tell us? Do we, how do we enforce our policies? What are our policies? I think if we all put on authenticate right now, we'd all have a different response as to what we're going to do with the same figure, that percentage figure. So, maybe we can all try and come up with some ways that we can work a little more in similar fashion to each other. And then, of course, this is the big one, resource disparities. So there are journals with, literally tens of thousands of submissions and a huge editorial office. And I know there's someone here that's got probably under 30 submissions a year. So, how do you manage to have a system that can be, across that broad gap of size? And also, and this is what you're going to hear about today, a lot of editors really do rely on manual checking still. And editors, I mean both managing editors, which is what I was for many years, and also editors-in-chief, which is what many of you are. And could AI be a tool to support integrity checking in the future, even though we're also checking for AI? So that does sound like it's a bit of a conflict, but no, there are lots of ways that it could. But at the end of the day, there is still a need for human oversight. And we have to double check these things, but it's not just that. It's like, okay, so there is a problem. Do you want a machine communicating now with your authors? No, you want to do it. So how are we going to do that? So that's really what we're going to get through here today. And the first topic that we're going to just cover are some of the manual techniques for detecting integrity issues. And it doesn't matter if you've got all the tools under the sun, you're probably still having to do some manual checking. So my first question is actually to Ines. Some of these questions are going to be for the panel, but this one's specifically for Ines. What integrity items are on your intake checklists when checking in new or revised submissions? And maybe you just want to tell us a little bit about your journal before you answer that.
Yes, and you find the information here where Diamond Open Access, established in 1996, so nearly 30 years in work, so to speak. Public health oriented, we receive around 1,000 to 1,200 submissions per year. Our scope is infectious diseases, and we're non-profit. We're published by a non-profit European Union agency that deals with infectious diseases, the ECDC. We publish online 50 issues, so weekly, more or less, and we're a very small team that does everything. And so what do we do among the everything? So upon submission, we have some so this takes you down from the tools and from the bigger picture to really sitting in your office and hands-on work. So it's maybe not so mundane, but it's really what we're doing every day. So when do we start considering we may have a problem among the 1,000 or so submissions that we see over the year? Single author is the first fact, and we discussed this over lunch today, because in some disciplines, and that's probably yours, a single author is really is an achievement because it's a super duper expert. For us, a single author is a red flag. Then we check the affiliation with the content of the article. If that doesn't match, that's another red flag. And during the pandemic, where we received 3 times as many articles that we had received before, this posed this small team, which wasn't increased in size. And we had a lot of problems with that, because physicists would all of a sudden start modeling infectious diseases, and some would get it right and others would get it wrong. So which physicist would you accept to be the right modeler for an R0 or the outcome of a certain measure to curb the epidemic? So unclear publication record, and that's something that's been mentioned often today already, but we manually go into various databases and check what the person has, even though we're using Editorial Manager, and you can go on a flag and you can directly go to PubMed and see the publication record. Unclear contributions. Contributions they're tedious to check, because you really need to check all the name. When there are 20 authors, it's quite some work, but sometimes it's very obvious and evident. Local authors, often that's another flag, because we've discussed, and this takes a bit of discourse, we have a policy whereby we encourage and nearly mandate people to include local authors, because often in terms of investigations in our field, local authors who are the ones who provided the data are in the end not the ones who are having their names on or have been given the chance to be co-authors. So we mandate that at the inception of the work, local authors are included, and checking this is also quite difficult. You know, an outbreak, let's say in the south of Spain, being written up by Norwegian authors, maybe it's strange. Okay, what else do we have? Inclusion of local authors. And then we have the cover letter. The cover letter, we don't like stilted tone. We don't like if you flatter us too much. We think that's probably wrong. You know, you use the wrong title, you accept the wrong journal, and that we don't like. No conflict of interest declared is another point that we come up. Funding, no influence of the funder. Often the funding is declared, but it's not very specified what the funder really had to do with the results that are being presented in this paper. Guidelines, we talked about mandated or not mandated guidelines this morning, and whether or not filling in a checklist helps. It does help at least people to think about it. Images, we clearly ask, of course, for permission, copyright, and if this is worded a bit strangely, we have a red flag. Patient consent, often our authors think it's not needed, and they think because they don't write the postal code and the name and the street, they don't need any author, they don't need the patient's consent. So patient consent not needed and excessive details about the person are given in the manuscript, of course, raises a flag. And then artificial intelligence tools, and we will hear more about this. So I'm stopping here.
Are there
There's
any
my
other
time.
manual techniques that you guys would use?
Well, yeah, actually something I probably should have disclosed when I introduced myself was I wasn't an editor for 7 years before I switched over to the ethics team. And so I worked in a journal that published translational research. So preclinical models of disease and early phase clinical trials. And our team were also advocates of using journal specific checklists. And we had different checklists depending on the stage of the manuscript. So at submission, and we generally consider kind of scope and advance, and if there were any major ethical issues, for example, if chloral hydrate had been used as an anesthetic in a preclinical study, that would be an outright rejection. And then we'd have checklists, checklists for later on in the life cycle of the manuscript. And I think it wasn't until I shifted over from editorial to the ethics team that I realized how many vulnerabilities there are in the workflow of a journal. And I think I would urge editors to be very cautious when it comes to kind of dealing with revised versions of a manuscript. So authors have the opportunity, if they wish, to kind of stuff references full of citations, and they might be inappropriate and self-serving because they could be self-citations or part of a citation cartel. There's also the opportunity to add or remove authors, so they could be part of authorship for sale operations. So it's really important that revised manuscripts are scrutinized in this way, and that any authorship changes are approved by the handling editor. Another vulnerability is kind of post-acceptance, because usually editors, they click accept eventually after peer review and everything's in order, click accept, and a lot of editors will never see that manuscript again. And this offers an opportunity for authors to switch figures, to increase the number of citations further, and to change the composition of the authorship. And the problem there is that if kind of proof people in the proofs team aren't diligent, then there's no feedback to the handling editor for reassessment, and so things can slip through.
Yeah, I could add here from the perspective of my own journal that, as it has stated already before, this Finnish language a little bit restrict kind of how much we get manuscript, and also it's a quite small country in a sense that you usually somehow know people, and it's quite easy to check in that sense. But that's the good point, that after when the manuscript is revised, we ask a report from the authors to say what they have changed, and especially if there are any changes in the authorship, then it's kind of quite a big red flag in that.
Yeah, can I add something? What we do is we really pester our authors. We ask them in the final version, we have a standard comment, and we ask them to reconfirm that all the authors named have fulfilled all 4 ICMG criteria. And we ask them, even though they declared no conflict of interest, we ask them again in the final version, when everyone is asked to be approving the final version, we ask again, did you really not have any conflict of interest? So we're a bit, so they're getting used to that, but at least we try to remind people of the important steps that we want them to consider normally at submission, not at the last stage. And sometimes things come up at that stage still.
Yeah. You in your previous slide, you had cover letters, and I'm a big advocate of bringing cover letters back. If you want to try and get around these paper mill pumping stuff out, have people start submitting a cover letter again. Are they really going to go to all the trouble to write a beautifully, carefully considered cover letter? But also, those of us that have done this for years, you can usually tell right away there's something in that cover letter that is just a little giveaway, and they'll never know, but you just know. So I'm glad you brought that up in your slide. So I do have another question about when we talk about manual things, and that is about, do you do anything to assess author and authorship credibility, such as checking institutional affiliations, expertise areas? If you're working in a small field and you see a name that you've never come across before, do you do any manual checking?
Of course.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Well, what does that look like?
Obviously, I know for their email address at first, if there is like kind of real institution behind the person, or if he or she has actually affiliation, then I Google and check if he or she has any that kind of research behind. But usually I know, and if I don't know, I always can ask, and then we have a huge and really skillful editorial board which can help in this kind of situation. I mean, if it's kind of discipline that I wouldn't know, but usually, Yeah.
And do you do the same for citation verifications? Or is that too much work? Are they like, people making up citations? Of course, AI seems to throw in some random.
No, we don't do that. We actually have to only trust to our peer review process.
Yeah.
We do check citations.
You do.
And I always go through the citation list quickly.
Right.
And then during the last stage, when I clear an article when I give green light that it's being published, you get the sense, and I think all of us who've done this for years, you get the sense, I should double check this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, you sense it, and then often it goes wrong.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is what to be aware of when using the integrity tool. So all of you, maybe just quickly identify in your daily practice. I mean, maybe less so you, Dan, because you're above it all in what you do, but identify some of the tools that you guys use. So, what do you have access to?
Do you want to
I can start because we don't have actually any tools.
Well, that's so right there. You have no tools. Yeah.
We're using Authenticate, and I'm say halfway happy at times.
Right.
Because I think we discussed this with someone yesterday. I'm not always sure if the very limited times we get problems flagged, and this is over a period of nearly 20 years. We have very good authors, obviously, and many of them we know ourselves, but I'm not quite sure if it's that little of a problem generally, because many people, it's not only about what you consider plagiarism, but many people would use self-citation or self-copying. There is a more, what is the is it not, what was the coined term for it? There's a specific, text recycling of their own materials. I think it's really it's more that people are not aware that this isn't okay, and there are only 20 ways of how you can describe a method if it's a standard method. So why would you bother and change every word and compose it new? So there are some limitations, and I'm still a bit intrigued that we don't get high scores.
Yeah. So I just want to ask a question then about, did you ever get any training on how to use authenticators? And
yes,
you did. And
we
who
did.
Trained you?
First of all, I mean, when we decided to buy Authenticator license, set up the license, we got training from the provider, but we also, I mean, at events like this, we sometimes are we doing the right thing? Maybe we're doing something wrong, and then we try to get ourselves a bit more skilled. But we have a certain threshold. Unfortunately, I can't exactly tell you what we set to the system now. I would say, but we have a threshold that we set, and then sometimes we do random checks below that threshold. So our system in the editorial manager system, when there's a certain score, is it 15, 20% roughly? It flags, and then we would look, and then often it flags cite. We've discussed this yesterday, right? There are cited parts, or there, as we said, text recycling and others. So it's a bit of a judgment call.
But I think this speaks to how we're all here at ease. This is the exact sort of place where we're going to learn what to do here and what other people are doing. And it would be great if there was some more standardization in the training, because I do find that industry tends to just give us a product and then go figure it. And that can lead to all manner of issues in terms of how we are interpreting it and how we're delivering the messages back to authors. I've literally worked at a journal where the incoming editor completely swapped around their policy. The previous one used to write back and say, can you just change the text? The next editor that came in was like, you're out of here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we need some sort of standardization here. I'm trying to do. So I do have a question then for Dan. So, okay, a lot of us are working with really small budgets. Maybe we don't have a publisher that's giving us the tools that we would like. So Dan, are there some tools out there that are actually freely available that you could talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I should preface this section by just saying that I don't think we should underestimate the ability of a well-trained editor to be able to identify research integrity issues without complex, sophisticated tools. And this ability can be enhanced further by using some of the free tools and resources that are immediately available. So I've tried to collate some of these, but it's not an exhaustive list. And it's just I've tried to detail those platforms and tools that I use myself or my team use. So yeah, the first category is kind of identity validation or verification, and ORCID has been mentioned quite a few times throughout the day, but this is a really useful platform for being able to create a unique identifier for a researcher who can then input all of their kind of publishing history and affiliation details and funding details, contact details, and this makes it a really useful resource for being able to identify an individual. There are also ways to harness free IP finder tools, and so, for example, if the editor receives an email from someone who would like to be a guest editor at that journal, it might be possible just to take the necessary details from that email and put it through one of these IP finder tools, and you can localize the device that sent this email, and that might be quite useful for being able to tell whether it's a bona fide or fraudulent request or slightly fishy request. There are many platforms that can be used to look at publishing output, and this can be quite useful. So PubMed, of course, Google Scholar, Dimensions AI platform. So this can be useful for looking at trying to assess the publishing output of an individual, trying to look at the number of times these articles have been cited, whether any of these articles have been retracted or have associated corrections. And then there are those tools that can identify specific research integrity issues. So that includes the Retraction Watch database, which compiles all of the retractions that are issued. PubPeer and the extension, they're incredibly useful tools, and so this is kind of an opportunity for post-publication peer review. And the extension, I don't know who uses this extension. I guess it's pretty well used. I find it incredibly useful to be able to identify issues that might exist in post-publication articles. Yeah, there's the Guillaume Cabernac's problematic paper screener, which looks at lots of different aspects of suspected research integrity issues, tortured phrases, fetive clay references, for example. And then, of course, there's the STM Integrity Hub, and STM Integrity Hub have been mentioned many times today, but it's a really fantastic effort, and there are tools that are being developed and to be used in a cross-publisher fashion that are super useful for being able to flag issues in submitted manuscripts early on in the life cycle of that submission. Then, of course, there are free stats tools. They're There are also, when it comes to conducting the investigation, there's plenty of guidance via the COPE page. There are incredibly useful decision trees and kind of cases that are discussed amongst its members, which are really useful for providing guidance. And then, yeah, there are compliance checks and reporting guidelines, which are also incredibly helpful and freely accessible.
This slide is phenomenal, Dan. There's so much useful information on it. So, I think anyone wants to take a picture of it now before I move on. So, now's a chance. All right. Okay. So, how can editors learn more or share their experiences? So, Paula, you're in Finland. At this unpronounceable journal. You're at this journal, but what national networks exist for sharing information for you? Because I imagine that's something that's relatable to many other people in smaller population countries. And if there isn't much, what would it look like ideally? So do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that there are several publishers in my journal. So it's not only the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare, there are also couple faculty from the University of Tampere, and then one faculty from University of Tampere, and then one faculty of University of Helsinki, and then two other research institutions. So it also tells that we are able to get good editors in our team in a way, because they think that it's good to have some researcher to train this kind of work. So it's kind of a small network as such. But then at the national level, we have the Finnish National Board on Research Integrity, which is also obviously quite important for us. I think there was a law which came in force in 1991 or 1992, and since then there has been this kind of board, which is kind of an expert body of the Ministry of Education and Culture actually, and get funds. It works, and it's also appointed, but it's a scientific community. It's actually propose people on that board. So it's kind of, and there are people from the different career stages as well. So in that way, we try to collect and we get a bit different views, because obviously, if you only rely on the professors, the worldview is a bit different than some people who are a bit more early on their career. And yeah, maybe we can take the second slide.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so, and as I already said, the journal like us, we are quite dependent on not only our editors, but also our editorial board. And it's kind of really, even though they don't work so much maybe in calculating their hours, but it is still kind of a way to get supervision to our purview process. And then obviously we have these editorial meetings, and then in those I'm just asking all the editors if how it's going on, if there are any specific cases we should discuss, and it's also about learning from each other in that sense. And obviously, as we are, and I'm working in the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare, so other editors are working also in the universities or the institution, and the conducts come from the institution as well. So we are kind of utilizing quite broadly different kind of knowledge. And then obviously, For instance, as you might have noticed, we are quite many Finns here in the seminar room. So we also discuss with the other journal editors unofficial way and learn from them. So, but obviously there are in Finland, and I think it's the similar way in other Nordic countries, that there are quite different kind of associations and NGOs in the field, and it's the same in Finland. So we have Finnish Association for Scholarly Publishing, which also gives some guidelines, and they organize training courses, and sometimes we get some grants to develop our journal processes. And then the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies, who actually offers the platform which bases on open journal system, which mentioned already in a previous session. And that's the way that I think it's more like because we have a limited resources, we try to use them quite wisely, and also a little bit obviously, there comes some problems because, for instance, this open journal system, I don't know if it's really, really good for any journal, but at the same time, it's kind of way to actually use kind of electronic platform in our journal processes. So, yeah.
Okay, so do you think that there's any value in, I mean, you've just talked about all these different networks.
Yeah.
What about and this is a question for all of you, I guess, by subject domain? What if the editors in pick a field, dermatology, all got together and said, this is how we're going to do this. These are the standards we're going to set. Is there any value in that? Is that I mean, do those networks already exist in some fields? Anyone, any thoughts on that?
I would say in some fields they may exist. It's quite complex because there's so many elements, right? One is the way how the journal is set up, the publishing model, and the other one is whether you're in an institution, in a society journal, or whether you have a big publisher, which is also part of the publishing model, of course. So I think it's quite complex. What we've been trying to set up is a network among journal editors working in the same field of public health in a non-institutional setting, and who are kind of their own publishers, or some of them are even published by publishing houses, to get together. We also have tried to establish a network among those in the European Union agencies that are dealing with the reports, and OECD was also part of these meetings to discuss ethical standards, ethical guidelines. But really setting standards is very difficult. At one point we wanted to try, and we had an idea, we even had an initiative to try and formulate standards for outbreak reporting, because that's obviously an infectious disease is something. But we, you know, you get, when you're a small journal, you get carried away by your day-to-day tasks and other things. It's by running a little behind at times. So I think there is room for that, but many times we are forced to follow the bigger publishers and hope they are going the right way and they're doing the right things. And so I call up Joan, who takes me around at the Lancet and shows me how they're doing things, and I learn from Joan, or I talk to you, Baha. When I have problems, I through the networks that we've established, particularly also through EASE or through the Research Integrity Conference, which is an excellent resource. You just go and talk to the people, and then you try and stay in contact, and then it's a bit also on a one-by-one, and maybe your small team will then tap into the resources, and it's really, it's a human to human, a lot of it, I would say.
Yeah, I would say kind of pooling knowledge and resources can be incredibly powerful. And so if journals do this, and they've done this when creating reporting guidelines, for example, and you get harmonized guidelines that that are relevant to those journals that have contributed to that.
Maybe I can mention, I mean, when we did SAGE, the SAGE guidelines was an initiative from an EASE group who met at a conference. But it took us quite some time, and it was only possible after we had a 3-day meeting in Athens where we really physically sat together after we had talked about the idea for 2 years. So it's really when you sit down with others. I think a lot of online works, but it's not in the human nature in the end. It's really creating ideas together.
Okay, so well, thank you for that. We'll move on to the final topic very quickly. Two relevant issues right now: Gen AI use and image manipulation. So just quickly to all of you, do you have policies towards the use of AI at your journals?
We only have a policy that people have to tell if they have used AI and how they have used it. But then there are also a big difference if you are using the large language models or, for instance, the machine learning. We have published some article which has been which has utilized machine learning in the analysis, but they have then explained it, and it's more like a methodology than any other way. So then it's acceptable. But when it comes to using AI, for instance, in the preview process or just putting article together, so definitely not. So.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Dan, maybe if you could address this slide that's up here now, because I think this is one of your real areas of expertise. Could you talk about this? So this is identifying hallmarks for suspected Gen AI use. Do you want to walk us through that?
Of course, I'm just, I should probably add that Elsevier has got a Gen AI policy that's been in existence for a couple of years now, and it largely aligns with industry stakeholders. Just very briefly, Elsevier do allow authors to improve to use Gen AI assisted tools to improve the readability and language of a manuscript, as long as it's done with full human oversight and it's disclosed as well. As Joan mentioned, with regards to reviewers and editors, they are not currently allowed to use such Gen AI assisted tools because it's thought that we feel that the manuscript should be treated as a confidential document and should respect the author's rights. I think when it comes to identifying hallmarks of suspected Gen AI use, I think Matt this morning really did a great job of summarizing why there are issues with some of the current Gen AI detection tools, text detection tools that are in existence at the moment. And without being able to rely on these tools as a reliable kind of research integrity tool, I wanted to try and list some other ways that could be checked by editors that might identify hallmarks of suspected Gen AI use. So, I mean, the very first point that I wanted to make was that please read the manuscript. So the ethics team are dealing with quite a few cases of suspected Gen AI, inappropriate Gen AI use, and even a cursory read of the paper would be able to identify such issues. So it's really important. I don't mean to be glib when I say please read the manuscript. It's really important that the editors read the manuscript, peer reviewers read the manuscript, and if any issues are identified there, they're addressed certainly before the manuscript is accepted. So yeah, secondly, are there any associated PubPeer posts? So I know Guillaume Cabanac, he identified a cohort of over 100 papers published across publishing houses that included ChatGPT output, such as regenerate response. Please note that as an AI language model, certainly here is a possible, so these weren't picked up and they were quite rightly flagged. And I think research integrity sleuths are doing an absolutely sterling job identifying issues and posting them on PubPeer. And editors and research integrity teams should be looking at these posts and acting as quickly as we can. So yeah, is there evidence of Gen AI prompts or output phrases, as Cabanac managed to identify and continues to identify? Are there any fake or improbable references? So one of the things that chatbots can do is create improbable or absolutely fake references, and these can be identified by looking in the reference list, and they can't be resolved. And if you'd like to know more about this, there's a good paper that was published a couple of years ago in Scientific Reports looking at fabrication and errors introduced into bibliographic citations by ChatGPT. Are there tortured phrases? An example is linear regression becoming straight relapse. And this can be an indication that a chatbot has tried to find a synonym for a scientific phrase and altered its meaning. Does the manuscript contain outdated or unreliable information? So this can indicate limitations to the LLM training data, like date cutoffs. Yeah, there's evidence that there's been an increase in the prevalence of certain words over the last couple of years. Yeah, Matt alluded to this earlier today, but it might be an indication, it might be indicative of chatbot use by authors or reviewers even. Are there stylistic anomalies within the manuscript or reviewers' comments? This could manifest as the repetition of words or phrases, could be very superficial. So I've included, so ensure that all conclusions are strongly supported by the data presented. Yeah, it makes grammatical sense, but it's a bit superficial. Yeah, are there formatting telltales? So particularly when authors just use the output of ChatGPT and lump it straight into the manuscript, you can have a very formulaic structure. So you get an intro, subheadings, small short sections, and then an outro, and that can be a hallmark or a telltale sign of chatbot use. And also, are there unusual features in the images? Are they blurry, missing information, misspelt figure labels, garbled labels? And I think we're all familiar with the rat with the improbable physiology that was published and then retracted. It's good to just keep your eyes peeled for these kinds of hallmarks.
Well, we're just about at time, but there's one final slide that I wanted Dan to just very, very quickly talk through, and then we'll take any questions. I know we're at time, but if you want to stick around for a couple of minutes. I know a lot of you are taking pictures. Dan, just want to go over this quickly?
Yeah, I think, can I just double check? I think these slides are going to be circulated after the talk as well. Okay. So I'll go really quickly through this, but here are a few tips for identifying suspected image manipulation. So yeah, do a sniff test. So can you see any image anomalies, unusual contrast, particularly in blots? Are there strange artifacts or impossible features? If you see kind of on a fax plot, some of the cells fall outside of the axes, this would be a good telltale that something strange is going on and should be investigated. Do some of the figures look hand-drawn? Do the blots contain splices that haven't been indicated by the authors? Are there duplicated regions? Some people are extremely good at being able to identify these by eye. Yeah, are blots too clean? And when you think there are issues, or even when you don't think there are issues, but you're handling a manuscript, has the raw data been shared? And if it's been shared, has it been looked at? So you can check the raw data for completeness. Are there missing items? Does it faithfully reflect what's been published in the article or in the submission? Has replicate data been shared, and what's the variability? I.e., how representative is the published image? And then there are ways of checking the metadata, and there was a lovely session on metadata just a couple of hours ago. And verifying image anomalies, there's a lot of different resources that you can look at, and even using Photoshop and PowerPoint just to increase the contrast of the raw data. Maybe you can reveal something that has been hidden, or if there's a duplication, you can change the transparency of one of the images and overlay it onto the top of the other, and that can be a quite compelling evidence that there's an image duplication. And just finally, that it might be necessary to escalate to the institute, as institutes can be best placed to look at the raw data, to interrogate lab books. Yeah, sometimes this is necessary.
Okay, let's just quickly take any questions. Anyone got a question right now? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I think there's.
While the microphone's just traveling over there, I just want to thank the panel here for their meticulous delving into. I actually used the word delve today. I'm not exaggerating. Yeah, okay.
I will
It's
delve
perfect.
to the question, Eva. Again, hello everyone. Thank you for your insights. I was a bit surprised to hear that that there is a possibility of including additional figures, authors, etc. after acceptance of the manuscript. So I'm curious, how is it so? Is it because, I don't know, someone adds it before it goes to the production process? Or because in our journal, of course, if you don't have online submission system, perhaps it's less easy to detect, but in our journal, I am personally checking each step, the manuscript from the submission to the publishing and post-publication processes. So not sure how come that someone can add some more data into it after acceptance. Or I understood it wrongly.
No,
Not sure. No.
No, you didn't understand it incorrectly. You're absolutely right. And I think it depends on a specific journal's workflow. But I think lots of journals, after acceptance, the proofs go, they're basically outsourced to a different team. And that creates a vulnerability because the authors have an opportunity, of course, to amend the proofs. And sometimes authors can, if they're bad actors or they don't know what they're doing and they think what they're doing is appropriate, they can include new authors that don't have sufficient editorial approval. They can include citations. They can even switch out whole figures. And yeah, I mean, there needs to be ways to make sure this doesn't happen, so that vulnerability is tightened up.
Another question, Bill.
Hi, I guess it's for Daniel again. So this is about, I wanted to ask about the risk of I guess an arms race of technology between us and the bad guys out there. One of the things on your Gen AI slide that really leaped out to me is the reference to tortured phrases. So tortured phrases have been around since before Gen AI, before OpenAI made its big splash in the world, right? And it's mostly associated with a technique called rogeting or thesaurusing, which is where they would take it word for word to avoid Authenticate from flagging it. They would basically run it through a thesaurus and then just generate another. And it was a very crude and very dull way of doing it. And most of the famous tortured phrases come from that process. Gen AI is not actually terribly bad at doing that. It doesn't do it a lot. And so it's really hard to tell. And many of the, I think somebody mentioned earlier on in the day that a lot of those sort of generative AI detection engines really don't work terribly well. Yeah. So how do we avoid getting into this horrible arms race and trying to invent solutions to problems, trying to invent solutions to approaches, and then being out-evolved again by the bad actors?
Yeah, I think you've raised some good points there. I think in terms of the tortured phrase point that you've raised, yeah, of course, tortured phrases have been around. They predate Gen AI, and maybe the link between tortured phrase creation and Gen AI isn't terribly strong, although it's still open to debate to what extent Gen AI can facilitate the introduction of tortured phrases into manuscripts. But you're absolutely right. It's an arms race. And the thing that I worry about probably the most in publishing ethics is the creation of synthetic data, and our current tools to detect our current image forensics tools will be rendered useless unless they evolve to be able to detect this new form of manipulation, or unless there are other solutions that are introduced into workflows, such as digital watermarking or hashing raw data. And so, yeah, it really is an arms race, and it's up to us to be able to keep up, because there are very cunning ways to try and subvert the publishing industry.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and sorry we took a little bit longer than we should have done. I have no clue what we're supposed to be doing now. I'm going to look right at Mary.